Yes, take a moment and we will get started. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me to be here. I'm very excited.
Of course. All right, so I think we'll wait for like another minute and like have some more people join in before we get started.
Okay.
So yeah, our audio is working, video is working, so checks out. Now we're just gonna look at each other's faces for a couple more seconds.
Love that. You look great.
Oh, likewise, like, thank you. So it's always so much fun reading comments when you're doing these things. So if at any point I can't keep a straight face, it's probably just me reading the comments. So just letting you know.
Okay. I'm gonna try and avoid the comment section in general. I don't know if
That's
it'll
fair.
be like too kind.
That is fair. No, I mean, there is no reason for them to not be kind. Hi, Lela. Thank you for your hearts. I appreciate you. Um, I don't know if you want to know this, but I think somebody is saying that you look like Anushka. I don't know who that is, but that's the only comment that I'll read out to you.
That's very sweet, I think, depending on who Anushka is.
We'll just hope she's someone great. Okay, I think we can get started. For those tuning in through Rania or the prize, I just want to talk a little bit about what SAAG is. We are the South Asian Avant-Garde. We are a dissident literary anthology that is trying to rethink what South Asian art in today's moment means. In sort of in that vein, we do think of the anthology as a live thing that evolves, and we love having conversations with writers that are doing incredible work, such as you in South Asia. So now I'll just introduce you and the prize briefly, just to give context to our viewers. So Raniya Hosain is the winner of the Zeenat Haroon Rashid Writing Prize for Women, which has been set up to honor the memory of Zeenat Haroon Rashid by her daughter. I think the prize is in its second edition, and they have crowned Rania as the winner of this year. The theme was women and Pakistan, and the category was nonfiction. Although I think last year they did fiction. Rania hails from Lahore. She is currently studying for her master's degree in English literature at King's College London. Yes, I love people who study English. And is working on launching a digital literary magazine called Spacebar, which also has an Instagram account, so you should check them out. It looks great. She also won the Queen's Commonwealth Essay Competition in 2014 at the age of 15, and is now winning this prize as well. So yeah, congratulations, Rania. I read the essay. I was absolutely floored by it, and in order to prepare for this conversation, I had a chance to give it a couple of reads as well. So it's just been an honor reading, sitting with your thoughts and your words. And also, thank you for sharing something that is so vulnerable and, writing about womanhood, especially as Pakistani women, brown women, South Asian women, is always such a charged task. So with that, all of those things out of the way, I will ask you for a reading of your essay, Portrait of a Woman in Pain, which was published in Dawn as To Be a Woman in Pakistan. And I want to definitely talk a little bit about the title situation as well. But yeah, over to you.
Okay, so the bit that I'm reading is close to the beginning of the essay, and it's after I've been harassed in the car on my way home from Eid by this random middle-aged man. So it goes, the thing about any kind of harassment is that it takes things from you. Things you never even knew you could give. It took sleeveless chemises from me. It took wandering through my neighborhood park alone. It took, for a few seconds, my body, my sense of self, my name. It took, and it takes even now. Maybe womanhood is a constant emptying out. The sound of quickened breath in the street as heavy footsteps sound languid behind you. A trembling hand moving to lift up a neckline. pull down a hemline, brush hair like a concrete bridal veil in front of a face. And maybe womanhood in Pakistan is being retold with stories of your countless little traumas as a lilting, joking aside. I would be happy to be catcalled, my friend continued. It's the price you pay for being beautiful. Maybe he's a little bit right. Maybe womanhood is exactly that, the price you pay for being beautiful.
Thank you so much, Anya. That is such a strong passage. I mean, most of this is just so, it hits home for a lot of women who will read this. I know it's true for me. I'm glad you chose that passage because this is something I definitely wanted to ask you about. And I want to read that line, that's like my favorite sentence from the piece, which is the thing about patriarchy is that I don't know who I would be without it. And I think with that one sentence, I'm hearing hints of the second sex bourgeois, like, all this like sort of intellectual thought behind this one sentence is so apparent um, in such simple language. And it made me pause and think about how true that is in a lot of ways. But I want to talk about this like sort of notion of rendering womanhood into these, like you offer a lot of explanations for what that is, right? Like maybe womanhood is this, maybe womanhood is an emptying out. It is, it is this forced meticulousness. So in some ways, you are offering many metaphors for what womanhood is. And at the same time, I know in your piece, you're resisting against that idea of metaphors and in talking in metaphors. So I want to like ask you about how you approach this piece, because so many times patriarchy is kind of, we're working and operating this equation of patriarchy is womanhood. And I know you say that this is not what I wanted to be even towards the end. So I want you to just talk a little bit about how you approached, like, navigating that very thin line of writing about our very real experiences, but at the same time resisting that notion that womanhood is victimization, is sort of this like this world of despair. So yeah.
Well, when I first saw the topic and I saw women in Pakistan, like the first thing that came into my mind is that, oh, I'm going to write something sad and traumatic. And I was like, wait, wait a second. Why is that? Why can't I think of womanhood as anything other than pain? And I've done an English degree and I'm doing a master's in English. So I've read a lot of I've read The Second Sex, I've read Judith Butler, I've read Audre Lorde, all these amazing feminist thinkers. And I've sort of realized that there's no such thing as womanhood that is like a solidified construct, right? There's no such thing as a singular female experience or a singular way to approach womanhood. But then at the same time, it's like this category that's enforced on us, that we're forced to live in, and we're forced to sort of work against all the marginalization that it brings, and we're forced to create solidarities within it just to function in the system. So it's sort of like, how do I sort of do away with the notion of womanhood when womanhood is where I'm finding my solidarity and where all of these other women that I'm working with are the only thing that's allowing me to speak in this patriarchal world. And it's sort of this weird dialectic where you want to say that there's no such thing as womanhood or a certain experience of womanhood, but then we all experience these sort of the same sort of suffering, the same sort of pain.
Yeah.
And it's sort of interrogating that idea, because so many women reached out to me after I wrote my essay and they're like, we've been through the exact same thing, or we've thought the exact same thing. And there's so much that connects us in terms of how we experience Pakistan and how we experience the world. But then that's sort of, is that the only thing that connects us? That's the question that I'm asking. Is the only thing that connects us our suffering and our tragedies? And it was like, the essay wasn't meant to be an answer as to what womanhood is, or even what womanhood in Pakistan is. As in, for me, it was sort of a series of increasingly frustrated questions and sort of trying to navigate it and trying to figure it out the best way I could, which was through writing about it.
Yeah, no, I think I can definitely see that see that with the essay because it's also like I want to talk a bit about style, right? I mean, you write in this very sort of stream of consciousness. Like it's as if it's as if I'm witnessing you think with like on paper. Um, and it definitely like you embody that idea of kind of like we don't know what this is. We don't know what womanhood is supposed to mean for us, and the fact that we're always being asked to intellectualize it or to render it in some sort of formal manner that is tangible when so much of it is not. Like, I don't know what it means to be a woman, and then even just
Exactly.
sort of if we think about gender, um, and how so much of oppression is kind of it is exists within that binary of man and woman as well, and how do we as people who are even you know maybe we identify as women, but maybe we do want a world without gender and without all these things that are enforced on us. And I know your piece deals a lot with like labels and how you want to resist them and challenge them. So I want to like bring I mean, I know we spoke about this briefly, but your title. So I know you told me that Portrait of a Woman in Pain, you said was supposed to be ironic. And it is a very different title from To Be a Woman in Pakistan, which I feel like kind of to the reader, perhaps, or even in general, just seems like it's hearkening on some monolith when your piece itself is resisting against that idea. So I want you to sort of talk about the original title a bit, and maybe if like has the reading changed for you or other people around you with that change.
So, the way that I approached the title is that I wrote the whole essay and I finished compiling all of my thoughts, and then I thought, oh my God, I need a title. And I had to figure
How's
out
that
what to title
happens?
it. And I just seen Portrait of a Lady on Fire, first of all.
Right.
And second of all, I thought it was meant to be sort of self reflexive and sort of ironic. So the title was sort of a joke about everything that was happening in the essay. It was sort of meant to be a little dramatized, a little overly like, metaphorical and like Portrait of a Woman in Pain, or like, Eliot-ish portrait of, not Eliot, what's his name? Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. That guy.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
My
I'm
head is
lost.
blanking. Now it's gonna bother
Yes.
me. You
You know
talk
who
and
I'm
I will
talking
remember
about.
it. Yes.
Yes. So it was sort of meant to be self-reflexive and sort of kind of a joke, but also sort of like hints of the truth, because the sort of conclusion that I semi reach is that most women, just by existing in the patriarchy, are in pain. So,
Yeah.
Portrait of a Woman in Pain is just a portrait of all women.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that Dawn changed it, and they did approach me about the change and they did ask me, and the Zeenat Haroon Rashid people were very kind, and they were like, it's your piece, you have autonomy over it, and you can
Mm-hmm.
say no if you want to. But we think you should change it, A, because they thought it was too like wordy and too like clunky,
Right.
and also because I think it's the sort of title that only really makes sense once you've read the whole essay.
Right.
And I think that in newspapers, it just doesn't work like that. You can't have the title as the end point of the essay. It has to be the hook, the thing that sort
Right.
of gets you into it. So I think they changed it to reflect like the changing context, if that makes sense, of it being in a newspaper.
Right.
Um, I definitely loved the original title. It was
Me
definitely
too.
something that I thought was funny. Other people did not. My dad hated the title. He's like, it's a very stupid title for a very good essay. And I was like, thank you. But other than that, like, I don't think it substantially changes the reading of the piece, personally. I think that
Right.
the strength of the piece was always meant to be in a little bit of subversion. Like, from the first line, it's like sort of questioning the idea of womanhood.
For
You know what
sure.
I mean? It's
Yeah.
meant to sort of Portrait of a Woman in Pain was meant to be something where you'd read the first line and be like, oh, that title doesn't really make sense. And I think that sort of applies with To Be a Woman in Pakistan as a title also, because when you see the first sentence, you're like, oh, she's saying womanhood isn't a thing. Wait, what? You know what I mean? So it's sort of,
Right.
I like that little contradiction that exists, and I think it was retained in the title change.
For sure. I want to read this small nugget out of your essay. A woman is a metaphor. Wait, no, she is a biological certainty, a fixed chromosomal truth. Wait, a woman is a giver of life. A woman is silver earrings and 5 different kinds of organic conditioner. A woman is salad for lunch and bile for dinner. A woman is a touched, untouched, virginal whore. I know this is like really strong, but it's also so humorous. When I was reading it, and the way that it kind of oscillates with the line of, lunch, salad for lunch, bile for dinner, which is a very sort of violent image almost, and then you kind of go to touched, untouched, virginal whore, which I think is so funny. So I want you to talk about humor and, in general, I know writing women, I literally hate that term. So many times we're asked to perform our pain even without writing, right? I feel like even categories that invite us to just talk about womanhood, like woman and Pakistan, like great, but can we like talk about other things as well? I mean, I'm sure that our lived experiences as women shows up anyways, but this sort of constant demand for us to perform our pain and our traumas, it, it's not fun. I will say that, but it's also getting. I mean, as a writer, I want your opinion on that, and then I also want you to talk a bit about you do subvert it with humor, right? Like this piece is really funny in so many places, and then really sort of serious, and I think that is like in some ways also a metaphor for what womanhood looks like, especially for Pakistani women. So yeah, I'll give you a chance to speak to that a bit.
Well, I think that humor is sort of one of the last refuges of like people who've been marginalized communities, and also people who are just like sick of it all and like sick of being asked to like perform trauma and to sort of talk about your deepest darkest woes, and oh look, that's what it is to be a woman, and I didn't like that that was something that came to my mind also. It's something that I
Right.
immediately thought of when I saw women in Pakistan. I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to fall into that thing where I talk about all of these horrible things and be like, well, look at that, women. And I think that humor is always something that's just knee jerk for me. It's just how I process things and deal with things. And there is so much humor in the situation of women in Pakistan and how they sort of deal with it, how they resist. Women here are so funny. They're so funny. They're so
True.
clever. They're so kind,
Yes.
and I wanted my piece to sort of reflect that and show that, but like you said, at the same time, like there has to be room for like that sort of seriousness, that sort of tonal shift, that sort of the actual harsh realities. So I tried to keep it light. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the essay also that the 2 instances that I talk about, they're not going to be like major, like life altering
Yeah.
instances. They're going to be very small examples, but they're going to be examples that are sort of indicative of like a wider problem, right? And of a system of oppression that shows up in all these minor ways.
Yeah.
And
No. I like highlighted that portion as well, where you were like, in saying the small things, you automatically are revealing the larger things. So thinking about the large things, talking about the large things, I want to sort of ask you about the sort of context of feminism within Pakistan at the moment. Me Too. There's so much that's happened in the sort of recent months, weeks, but also just in general the momentum of the past few years. And I want to ask how that has. I know you talk about Misha Shafi, you mentioned her, and you mentioned a couple of other things that we've seen in the news recently. So I want to ask you how that either changed or modified the way that you approach this essay.
I think the Misha Shafi thing was a really like, it was such a groundbreaking seminal moment for feminism in Pakistan. And it was the beginning of a whole new thing, a whole new wave in feminism, I think. Because I saw so many feminists, so many women who claim to be feminists say, like, where's her evidence? She should have just kept quiet. Why did she work with him if he was a harasser? You know what I mean? Like, and who were sort
Yep.
of blaming her. And that sort of opened my eyes to like the cracks and the breaks within the movement itself, and how women sort of play a role in our own oppression. And we're sort of indoctrinated into the system of patriarchy, and we sort of reinforce those patriarchal ideas and notions. But also, it just opened my eyes to the power that women have, right? Like Misha Shafi saying that and speaking out, like despite what everyone said, despite what was happening, like just being like, no, I'm going to speak my truth. And the way that there was this sort of ring of solidarity created around her by these young feminists. And I thought that was so beautiful and awe-inspiring to watch. And I thought it was amazing. And also another figure that I mentioned is Kandil Baloch, who I
Yeah.
admire so much. And again, it's seeing the way that women rally around her as this sort of feminist figure. Like that image of like the masks of Kandil's face and those pictures that you saw, it's so awe-inspiring. It's sort of a signal that women are not gonna take this sort of shit anymore. We're not gonna just passively sit and watch it happen and watch like just ourselves and others we know be oppressed. We're gonna do something about it. So I think we've definitely seen that more in the past few years with Aurat March and Misha Shafi, and like lots of, like, and social media also, and the way that it allows you
Yep.
to be
For
more
sure.
aware of these movements. I'm sure they always existed, but you're more aware, they're more in your face. Like you can't not know about Aurat March, and you can't not know about Misha Shafi. It's sort of being pushed into everyone's feeds, in front of everyone's faces. So I think that all of these things really influence the way that I went about writing my piece. Like, A, the solidarities that we create, but B, the ways that we also bring each other down. And again, another sign that womanhood isn't like a coherent experience where we're all just in it together. It's very massive in and of itself.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Misha and Kandil Baloch and Aurat March, all sites of, I would say, backlash in Pakistan, sites for violence almost. And I want to ask, thinking about fear that we live with on daily basis as, non-male um, sort of identities, but also with writing that, is now being shared very widely. It's been published in Dawn, it went to people's homes. I want to ask you if that was a concern for you, or whether you've thought about that. Like, was there any point where you found yourself censoring as when you were writing this essay? Like, has a thought occurred to you at all?
Well, I mean, first of all, I come from like a very privileged position in which I've been given the freedom to sort of explore these ideas in my family, in my home, and to sort of, articulate them and find the ways to articulate them. So obviously that privilege helped. But also, I don't know if I self-censored. I was going to include some stuff that was maybe a little less PG-13 and like more explicit in the essay, and then I decided against it, not because of the reaction I thought it would have, but because I ended up thinking that the essay would be more powerful if it was restrained, and if it was sort of just all the little ways it seeps into your life rather than like bigger things. But I don't think it ever. I I I did not write it thinking that people were going to read it. Is the thing. Like I
Okay.
just wrote it because I saw the topic and I was like, oh, I love this. I'm going to write about it, and I wrote about it, and it never occurred to me to even think about how people would react or if there would be a reaction. I mean, I'm seeing comments now where people are like, oh, she should have covered up, or oh, and elite women in Pakistan, again, her issues don't matter. And I'm just sort of like, oh, okay, people have thoughts about this, because I didn't expect that to happen for some reason.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it all happens really quickly, right? Like you find out you won the essay, and then that very week it kind of goes to pub as well, right? Is that how it happened for you?
I found out, I think, a few weeks before
Right, right.
that I had won. So they got in touch with me and they told me that I had won. And it felt like forever that I had to wait before like the world knew and I could announce it and sort of be like, I won.
Right.
But
That
it
makes
was
sense.
also like the response was very quick, because I just sort of expected it to go up, go into dawn. My family would read it, they'd say very nice beta, and then that would be it. But
Right.
the response has been insane. I'm so happy about it. I'm so happy that people read it and it resonated with people. So yeah, I'm very excited that it's being read.
Right. Well, speaking of privilege, you bring that up, and I know you mentioned that in your essay as well. That as somebody that, like class is obviously a huge factor in sort of defining what kind of womanhood you are entitled to within Pakistan. And I know that I was, seeing some comments around Twitter, the Bird app, and these other apps. And there's this line that people were highlighting, and I do want to bring it up and give you a chance to talk about it, where you call Islamabad Club a middle class sanctuary. And a lot of people disagree with that because, you know, thinking about what middle class looks like in Pakistan is not the club experience. So I just want to give you a chance to respond to that, and again, and also speak a bit more about how, as somebody who comes from privilege, and anybody who writes in English, speaks English, went to institutions that teach in English, like we all come from a place of privilege. So I want to give you a chance to talk about how class featured in this essay, and what your kind of thoughts were around that.
Yeah, so the line about Islamabad Club being a middle class sanctuary, I very much wrote it as sort of a joke. Like it was meant to be, because I wrote this whole thing about like Nero watching Rome burn as I drove away from Islamabad Club. And then I was like, okay, but I know I'm being over dramatic. Like I know that this
Right.
isn't like the end of the world, right? Um, I do think that I could have chosen a better term than middle class. I know that it's a very contested term. I didn't think about it that much before I wrote it, and that's on me. I should have chosen my words more carefully. Obviously, I understand that my situation and the issues that I faced are very privileged in comparison to some that other people have faced. But I didn't go into it thinking that I was going to do like a complex class analysis. This wasn't like my commentary on what the middle class is in Pakistan. It was just sort of a throwaway
Right.
comment, that I didn't really think about. And then I guess Twitter thought about it for me and picked it up.
It
Which,
always
I mean,
does.
it's fair. It's fair. It's a fair comment to make. It was perhaps not the best chosen word, but it was sort of meant to highlight that, even though this isn't like a huge, like major oppression, and even though like nothing significant has been taken from me, I still feel that sense of loss, even if that's over dramatic. Like I still feel like something has been lost to me. And
Right.
that's sort of the, like when you talk about privilege and how it affects how I write, like I'm very conscious of my privilege. I'm very conscious that it's like, again, that the issues that I talk about are very like small issues in the grander scheme of things. And I try to mention it throughout the essay that, I am privileged. I am self-aware enough to know that I am privileged. But again, there's this thing that happens online where when you talk about the pain you've been through, people are like, that's not a big deal. You haven't really suffered. You haven't really been through anything. And I just wanted to sort of tease out all the little experiences of like pain and loss and hurt and shame that come along with womanhood, no matter which class you are, even though it's obviously worse for women who are not as privileged, and who aren't in positions like mine, like, you know, poor women or transgender women or queer women. Like, their experiences of womanhood are obviously much more difficult and fraught than mine. But it's still like, because you've been through some sort of pain or some sort of loss that sort of resonates on that scale, I feel like those are the building blocks for empathy and for solidarity, and to sort of be like, I felt something like this too, and sort of to reach across and to sort of be like, let's fight this whole system together. And
Right.
that's what I was trying to do, to point out like all the little ways in which we're connected, in which we can build solidarity and empathy with each other.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really interested in what you, I think, now said a couple of times that, you know, that these are small things when, you know, I think when it's our own experience, we always say that to ourselves. And when somebody else is saying, we're like, no, this is actually huge, and it is. Um, and you know, there's always like a scale of violence in which women are asked to operate, and or I feel like all marginalized identities. Okay, oh, if you're a Shia, oh, they broke down your, you know, Imam Barga, but they didn't like bomb it. Like, you're fine. I think for Ahmadis, they'd be like, oh, they're just calling you kafir. They're not. You're not dead. And there's just such like a huge gap in between those two things. And a lot of times you're right, like they do it for women at least, like we're always infantilized, and like our experience are always trivialized. But I want to ask you, especially in this essay, but overall in your writing, like how do you how do you conceptualize violence against women? Like, how I'm trying to phrase this in a way that, because I feel like I'm thinking about this as well in my brain at the moment. But like, how where do you think that writing about women and trauma is, you know, in some ways lacking, or like, you know, like, has it gone wrong in your opinion, like anywhere? You get what I mean? Like, how did that inform the way that you wrote about this experience?
So I I sort of approached it as sort of just telling, I just wanted to be as honest as possible about things that had impacted me and things that had affected me and things that I knew that other women had gone through and had felt like similar emotions or similar things.
Right.
Like when I wrote the bit about, like the beginning bit about the man in the car on Eid, like I had never brought that up with my sister again after that. I don't know why, we just never spoke about it. But then I
Yeah.
showed her the essay and she's like, oh my God, I remember that man, you know? And it's just, these things stick with you and these little traumas sort of like build up and they just become a part of who you are and a part of your experience of womanhood as Pakistan, in Pakistan. But I just sort of, I don't think that I could write about women and trauma in Pakistan. You know, I think I can only write about myself and what I've been through and sort of try and, you know, like, you know, connect the dots sort of and try to be like, oh, this is why and this is how, and other women feel this too. And sort of try and build a politics and build empathy and solidarity around that as much as I can, because I only know how to write about myself and my trauma. I can't write about anyone else's. And I know that there are people who can and who can do it well, and sort of discuss the things that women have been through, especially women who can't discuss it for themselves. Like there's some great books about partition and the trauma that women went through, like oral histories and stuff, which are very helpful in understanding women and trauma and how it's embedded in the South Asian experience, sort of.
Yeah.
But I, I personally can only write from my perspective and for myself. and through myself, at least for now. That's what I'm focusing on, and that's what I was trying to do with the essay.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact that it spoke to so many people, despite the fact that it was so intimate and personal also, is just a sign that our oppressions are so interlinked, and they're so often just the exact same thing that happens over and over and over again to so many different women.
Yeah. I, I want to talk a bit about like your practice as a writer. Like, I know you said that you wrote this essay specifically for the prompt. So, like, do you write in the essay form mostly? Like, what kind of genres are you interested in? Like, what does your work look like other than this piece?
So I write a lot of poetry. I don't know if it's good, but I do write it. And yeah, I got very interested in the essay form recently, because I started reading a lot of like New Yorker essays. I read the one about Caroline Calloway, and I was like, that's that's what I
Right.
want to do with my life. And I started reading a lot of Joan Didion, and that was absolutely transformative, life changing, amazing. Slouching Towards Bethlehem, one of the best books ever written. And I just sort of started seeing what you can do with the form of the essay and the way you can sort of pull this stuff out of real life and sort of apply it to so many things, make it beautiful, sort of play with the form to make it sort of fold in on itself, but also open out and to sort of be metaphorical but not fictional. So yeah, currently I'm very into nonfiction and essay pieces. I also do short stories sometimes, but I also do a lot of poetry, and that's what I'm into right now. But at the end of the day, it's like whatever the muse wants, the muse gets. Whatever inspires me in a particular moment is
Yeah.
the form that I'll write in. It's nothing fixed for me.
It's funny you say that because when I was reading your essay, I was like, oh, this sounds like a lot of it is poetry. Sort of your use of commas, the way that your sentences kind of go on. There's like a lyrical quality to the writing, for sure. And and yeah, I mean, I definitely saw that. And do you think that that was sort of intentional, like, or do you think that just kind of came out in the way that you were writing this essay? Like, are you a poet first, then a writer, or like, well, how does that configure for you?
I definitely read a lot of poetry, and I think I read currently more poetry than I read prose or essays. So I think that that's definitely something that impacted me, like my reading practices. And I did start out writing poetry, so I don't think you can ever escape that sort of form and that sort of like intense metaphor and stuff. Once you've gotten into it, it's like it's for life. You can't escape. And I just, yeah, so I do think that the fact that I started with poetry has sort of tinged every other aspect of my writing. But also, I don't know if you read Joan Didion or
Yeah,
Julian
the year
Barnes.
of
I'm sure
magical
you have.
thinking.
Yes, amazing. And that's also quite poeticized, that sort of essay writing. It's quite metaphorical, quite poeticized. And for me, that's the sort of essay writing that I like, where it is sort of, like metaphorical and sort of figurative and thinking through things through symbols that are just sort of get repeated and then sort of grounding that. So I do think that there's something intrinsically poetic about the essay form when you do it like Didion does it, or when you approach it like I approach it. So I think that those two forms are very compatible.
Oh no, for sure. Um, so you mentioned Didion, but like, what are some sort of other influences, writers that show up in your writing, or that you're like,
Um,
man, I wish I wrote this, or could write like
I
this?
love I love Audre Lorde. Obviously, I mentioned her in the essay, and then
Mm-hmm.
sort of the people who were around her at the time, all amazing. June Jordan, Pat Parker, Adrienne Rich is amazing. Um, Someone who I really love is Elizabeth Bishop. I don't know Amazing. I love her. She's so good. Crusoe in England is one of the best poems I've ever read. I love Kamala Shamsi. I love Bapsi Sidhwa and Atiya Hussain, and I feel like all three of these women have sort of really shaped how I approach writing about Pakistan.
Interesting.
And especially, I love Bapsi Sidhwa. I read Ice Candy Man. I did it. I wrote on it for my thesis in my undergrad,
Oh, wow.
and I spent a lot of time with that novel, and I fell in love with it. It was amazing.
So
So
your
yeah,
entire thesis was just Ice Candy Man.
Ice Candy Man and then Sunlight on a Broken Column by Atiya
Oh,
Hussain. It was on partition
okay.
novels. The way
Nice.
silence and speech in partition novels is used to conceptualize trauma, basically.
Oh, wow. I mean, I'm sure those thoughts showed up in this essay as well then for you, if you've,
They,
sat down and thought a lot about these things. Yeah. What are you working on currently? Like, are you writing right now? What's like your writing life going to look like? What's it like now?
I am currently working on my piece for our magazine Spacebar.
Oh,
So there are, I think, five of us, five editors, and we're all working on pieces for the first issue of the magazine, which is coming out January 19th, and we're very excited about it. So it's that's what I'm working on right now, sort of writing a nonfiction piece again and an essay about inside and outside spaces, basically. So it's going well. It's barely started yet, but I'm hopeful.
awesome. I want to remind myself that there are people watching. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask Rania about the piece or anything else, please send us a comment and I will ask the question of her. But I want to, like, again, because we are also a sort of new publication and we all have, like, there's an ethos that brought this to life, and we're so excited for the output we've had so far and for our open calls, which will happen soon. But talk to me a little bit about your publication. What prompted you to start it? Like, what is what's the vibe?
So my friend Rabia Kapoor actually came up with the idea. So it's five of us literature students who met in King's College London in undergrad, and we're like based all around the world, and we wanted to find a way to keep in touch, but we also wanted to find a way to keep, making art together and producing art together and going through art. And it's called Spacebar because we're sort of interested in the relationships that spaces have with one another. So the first issue is about inside and outside spaces. So windows, balconies, sort of what you see outside your bedroom window, sort of maybe your body is an inside, and everything else is an outside. So different ways in which you can sort of think about those sorts of spaces and those sorts of ideas. And we thought that that spoke really well to the current moment and to quarantine and coronavirus and the way we've all had to redefine
Right.
our relationships with inside and outside spaces because of it. But
For
we're
sure.
not only going to do that. We're thinking of maybe doing the next issue as like religious spaces or like other sorts of spaces. But we're very interested in the way that you position your writing, where it comes from, where it stems from, which spaces you align with. And we're very interested in sort of linking writing with art and photography and that sort of thing. And yeah, we just wanted a highly curated place where we could put art that we loved and that we made together and make something that was interesting and beautiful.
I think we have a question for you. Somebody says that towards the end of your essay, you mentioned the experiences of trans women in Pakistan, and they want to know if you can speak a bit about how we can keep our notions of womanhood inclusive.
That's an interesting question. I don't think I'm very qualified to answer it, but I will try my best. Um, I mean, first of all, it's just basic respect, right? Respect for people's identities, respect for the way that people choose to express womanhood, even if it's not something that you personally, like would indulge in or engage in, like just having that sort of respect and sort of opening your mind to the ideas that womanhood isn't fixed, womanhood can be anything, and you don't get to define what womanhood is to someone else. All you can do is respect the way that they choose to manifest their womanhood or their lack of womanhood or their refusal to sort of engage with any gender, like whatever it is. Just starting from a place of love and respect and sort of the certainty that none of it is fixed. None of these categories are perfect and defined and enclosed. They are whatever the person standing in front of you wants them to be, and you have to give them the freedom to explore it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Especially given, in the writing world, there's been so much debate about transphobia among really significant writers. And yeah, I mean, it's always good to think about how, like, I think you mentioned this before as well. I think we have another question. I'd like to also ask about finding space in radical feminist activist organizations. Are you involved in any activism? Like, what's like your non-writing world look like? You
Not
can not
really.
answer it as well. I mean, you don't have to answer.
No, I'm not really involved currently in any sort of activism. I'm just sort of focusing on writing and my education. I would like to be in the future, and I hopefully will be. But currently, I am not a part of any radical feminist activist organizations.
That's fair. Okay, I think we just have a last couple of minutes together. So I feel like we've spoken a lot about women and trauma and pain and all of that. And although, like, even as I was approaching this, I was like, I'm not going to talk about that. We're going to keep the conversation fun and, like, we're going to reject those expectations from women. So let's talk about joy. What brings you joy? What is joy for you in sort of as a human, not as a woman? Just like what does that look like for you?
I think I find a lot of joy in writing. I find a lot of joy in reading. I find a lot of joy in sort of having space to walk around the city, to sort of experience the city in ways like I'm studying in London. So having that freedom and to be able to walk around without being afraid, I find a lot of joy in that. But I think mostly in reading and in writing, which is why I've been just studying it for the last 4 years. I plan to study it for pretty much the rest of my life, the way things are going. And yeah, so just reading and writing is the most joyful thing that I engage in, I think.
I love that, and I totally agree with that. And I think everybody at SAAG would as well. So yeah, the prize folk want to know how you plan on spending the prize money, and then I also maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the prize and your thoughts on it. But yeah, I'm also curious. Which is like how much? I think it's 100,000 rupees.
Yeah, it's 100,000 rupees. I have not decided yet. I asked a few of my friends and I was like, what should I do with it? And like my friend Misha was like, save it immediately. She's a Capricorn. She's an Aquarius. And my friend who is a Capricorn.
I love that you said that.
My friend who is a Capricorn actually told me that, oh, by the way, I think that you should take us all out to a big fancy dinner and just blow all of it. And I was like, I don't think I should do that. I don't think that's a good idea. But yeah, I haven't decided yet what I want to do with it. I think my mom will be very involved in that decision. I think she will be the one who tells me what I should do with the money and how I should spend it. She's already told me that I have to give like 10% of it away as just like
goodwill.
just like to thank a
That's
god.
nice.
And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, yes, you're right. I will do that.
I mean, yeah, it's true because in some ways it is income, right? Because it's labor for your sort of. I mean, writing is not the time that you take to type something out or put it down on paper. It so much of it happens before. And at SAAG as well, we're currently, this is going to be my plug, we're fundraising so that we can, once we have open calls, we are able to compensate our writers who are mostly from South Asia, and we want to be able to compensate them for their art and their labor, and to kind of emphasize this notion that art is not it's not the 1 hour a day that you take to write a paragraph. It's literally your entire life, and there's so few opportunities to be compensated for writing, even in Pakistan. I think I personally really like the ZHR prize. I think there's so much like good energy around it. I think it gives an opportunity to women to write, and again, like with the expectation that you will be compensated for it. A lot of times people will be like, oh, submit, and we can't compensate our writers at this point. And you sort of understand why that is, but it's also hard because then you can't really make a living as a writer. You always have to do the writing on the side and then have a day job as well. So if any of you are interested in more conversations with writers like Rania, and interesting work that we will be putting out, you can go to our website, saaganthology.com, and there is a donate button. If you don't have money, send it to people who do have money and ask them to donate. But yeah, how does this sort of like having a prize like this like feature into the way that you think about output or writing, and like now, like with having won the prize, what does that mean for you?
I I love the Zeenat Haroon Rashid Prize. I love the founder. I've met her. She's one of the nicest women in the world, and the kindest women in the world. And I love that it gives women again an opportunity to write and to be compensated. But also, I love that it publishes the long listed and the short listed essays on the website also.
Yeah,
So it gives women the opportunity to also be heard and to write and have that work actually reach people and resonate with people and be seen and be told that your work is good. It's on the long list. Here you go. You have potential. And I think that that's so important because we as women so often lack confidence in
yeah, for
our work
sure.
that I feel men have by default. They're just like, yes, brilliant by me. And women are just taught to
Oh God.
like cut themselves down. And having this opportunity and this platform for women was amazing. And I love what they're doing. And yeah, I also like, I was unsure whether I wanted to write. Like, I knew that I loved writing, but I was like, there's no scope. There's nothing you can do as a
Yeah,
writer in Pakistan. Like, I'm probably not going to be like the next Kamala Shamsi and make tons of money off of my writing and be like
I
set
don't
in
think
life.
she
Um,
makes tons of money,
exactly.
sadly.
Even she doesn't make tons of money and she's Kamala Shamsi. So, like, it's like I was so unsure and so uncertain in my own writing, and the prize really gave me a huge confidence boost and the means to sort of continue exploring my writing and to sort of believe that it could go somewhere, it could do something. And there's so few platforms in Pakistan that give women that belief in themselves. And I think it's just brilliant what they've managed to do in like 2 short years. I know that so many women are now going to be sitting at their computers writing, trying to win that prize. And that's brilliant to me. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always so excited to see what writing is going to come out of the prize, and I hope it becomes like more and more inclusive and widespread with in the coming years. I've always like wondered if they should also accept like Urdu submissions. That would be so cool to witness because there's so few contemporary Urdu writing. Like obviously we have our foremothers, like we've got the Chuktai, we've got Kurtzul and Heather and all of that. But I want to know like who else is writing in Urdu at the moment.
Yeah.
So I hope there are more prizes like there's more opportunities for us to get money for our writing. So please help us do that. Donate to SAAG. It's if you want to check out more of our work, you can look at it on our website. We have some wonderful interviews, including this one, and we're really excited to see what this anthology is going to accomplish. Thank you so much, Rania, for being with us. Thank you to
Thank you
everybody
for
who's
having me.
watching. I will publish this on our page, so if you want to send it to your, you know, um, friends and family or whomever, feel free to do that. And yeah, thank you again. Congratulations on your writing and the money. And I'm really excited to see what else you are going to put out into the world for us. So thank you,
Thank you very
Rania. All right, have a good one. Thank you, everybody, for
much.
watching. Bye.
Bye.